Alright. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the live session today. It will be conducted by our Chief of Press, Mr. Sagar Menon. He will be speaking to us on importance of press in a parliamentary democracy. So, over to you, Sagar.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, PCGT, for giving me this opportunity. I've always loved coming back to PCGT. I think this is my third consecutive year. Uh, Something about the organization's ethics and values that makes me keep coming back to them. Uh, all right, so I have been told to talk about the importance of press in a parliamentary democracy. Uh, I might digress a little bit. I'm going to talk about the press definitely, but what I have to contribute to the agenda per se, which is the importance of press in a parliamentary democracy. I think the press is extremely important in a parliamentary democracy. That's all I have to say about that. But uh, so thank you for coming for my talk. That's all I have. Just kidding. I think what I'm going to focus on today is about what my perception of the news is and how it's changed over the course of many years that I've consumed the news. I from I think ever since I was 6, I was always incentivized at home to kind of read the news. My grandfather used to always kind of bribe me and tell me that I'm going to pay you 10 rupees for every newspaper that you read. So I was always a voracious consumer of the news through newspapers and through television. And before pre the internet era, like the internet was not as huge back, say, in 2004, 2005. Uh, but then my perception around news and around what is being presented to me kind of changed. So that's what I'm going to kind of focus on today. My talk is divided into three things. One is what is the press uh, or the news or what is journalism, everything that comes under that umbrella, and how does the Constitution of India empower it? So to start off, actually I'll just cover whatever I'm going to talk about. Second is on what the news looks like now and why does it look like what it is now, and what is good journalism is the third part of my talk, which is what is good journalism and how do I shape my worldview or your worldview here for that matter. So let's start with what is the press. Uh, so the Oxford Dictionary says that the press is a printing house or an establishment. And the second meaning is it's a publishing company. Let's go on to seeing what news means or what Oxford Dictionary says what the news is. So I think it's again information about important and interesting recent events, especially when broadcast, report, or published. So newly received or noteworthy information. Again, nothing that we don't already know. And so why is there so much confusion about what the news is? And again, there's a lot of talk about freedom of press. So how does the Constitution of India empower that? Uh, Again, if I am not wrong, um, there is no specific provision in our constitution guaranteeing the freedom of press because the freedom of press is included in the wider freedom of expression, which is guaranteed by the Article 19, Section 8. Freedom of expression means the freedom to express one's own view, but also the views of others, and by any means, including printing. So again, implied by the Article 19 of the Constitution of India. So that is about what the press or the news is through, things that books have told us. What was my perception of the news? For me, it was a magnifying glass of what society is and a collection of exceptional things. When I say exceptional, I don't mean it with a positive connotation. I mean it that they were truly exceptional. It wasn't how the world works. And that's when I started questioning, the way I created my worldview based on watching the news. Because the news is essentially something that, that is a collection of things that don't usually happen. You will never hear that, hey, today there were no accidents on the JJ flyover, because it isn't perceived as news because it's not negative. The minute something is negative, exceptionally negative or exceptionally positive, is what is presented to us. On what the news looks like, before I get into what the news looks like, you and me, both of us should be asking the question whether the news is doing that anymore, whether the news is presenting facts or presenting things that we should care about. Now, that question is for you and for me to talk about. I'm not going to, give my judgment on what it does, but it's an interesting question to ask. And are things that really matter or really affect you being presented to you anymore? Now, this is a question I asked myself today. Interesting fact, when I started reading newspapers, there were two newspapers that came to my home. One was the Times of India, second was the Mumbai Mirror. Those were essentially the newspapers that I read. And if you look at today's Mumbai Mirror, it's essentially ads. First page is ad, second page is ad, more ads, very little news. And that is not really the Mumbai Mirror that I recognize, because the Mumbai Mirror that I recognize usually used to present issues that really affected me in real day time. I live in Kandivali. I at least got one or two news articles about what happened in Kandivali. My college is in Juhu. I used to get at least 5 articles on what happened in Juhu. So those were the things that really affected me and I really cared about. But apparently it's not important enough, because Mumbai Mirror, the daily Mumbai Mirror was discontinued, and a watered down version of essentially ads is what's being presented to us now. So I keep asking myself, why am I not being presented with news that I really, really care about? Now you can ask yourself, or you should challenge yourself to ask, are the news outlets or publishing media serving me news that I care about or something that directly impacts me? And I am not somebody who is going to be the judge of what directly impacts you. Again, those are questions that you have to ask yourself. So if you've got a pattern here, I am not here, or this talk is not going to be about me, talking or giving blanket statements about what's right and what's wrong. I'm going to put important questions that you need to ask yourself and see whether that's happening. Mumbai Mirror is now a digital version, and that's what it has been transformed into, and digital Mumbai Mirror is what we get. But the important distinction here is that it will never be the same, because digital by design focuses on quantity more than quality. They need the clickbaity articles, they need the volume, they need the traffic. And traffic and good stories don't always go together. Like, things that you should really care about and sensational news will not always lie in the same umbrella. And that is something that you need to realize. And we've all of us have talked about the attention economy, and the attention economy is essentially a theory where they say attention is a resource. That's a resource that you hold, and you decide to consume it however you want to. But social media by design doesn't give us a lot of control over how our attention is kind of used. And when you throw or bombard 10,000 articles from places that are or things that are not even remotely related to me, if my attention is being consumed towards those things, and I won't have attention remaining or the resource remaining to actually think about matters that really matter to me. Which is why, and what is interesting is also it won't leave you energy to create your own worldview. Now, how do you create a worldview that's fact based, that's based on evidence, that's based on not on exceptional articles that happen, because exceptional things aren't what the world looks like. So there's one more very interesting book, highly recommended, called Factfulness. Page number 74 talks about the attention economy and says that remember that media and activists rely on drama to grab your attention. Remember that negative stories are always more dramatic than the neutral or positive ones. So I think he's kind of summed it up really well of why the news is the way it is, why there are screaming matches happening every day on prime time. And those screaming matches aren't informational. When I consume news as a consumer, I need to feel empowered or feel informed the minute I stop reading that article or the minute I stop consuming that news. But that stopped happening in primetime debates. It's very sad because when I used to consume the news on the TV, I was quite happy, to understand what is happening around the world. And when it kind of turned into a debate that looks like this, with a moderator, with the left and the right screaming about things that don't really affect us, but also kind of dives into your bias. So if you're biased towards one side, you will always scream and cheer them and say, yes, that's why my side is right and your side is wrong. And in this generation, being right and being right has become more important than being truthful, and that's what kind of scares me. And which is why news debates or news in general on TV stopped being informational for me. Because when I used to tune in at 8 p.m., I expected to be informed, but at the end of every news debate, I just felt angry as to, are these the experts that are supposedly running our country? Because it was just a lot of confusion, and much to say, this does not the these debates which are sensationalized don't leave a lot of room for evidence. And that's essentially the foundation of good journalism or good news, is evidence, is facts. And sadly, evidence and facts have kind of left the room when it comes to journalism. It's all about what is going to get my consumer hooked, what is going to, because you have to really, now that I'm an entrepreneur, I also look as news as a product. News is essentially a product that has two objectives. The first objective is to inform you. In its purest sense, the news is supposed to inform you. And the second is to continuously hook you to their programming, be it the 24/7 programming on the TV or be it the 10,000 articles that are being bombarded to you on the internet. It's always to retain your attention because that is in their economic interest. At the end of the day, journalism is, whether you like it or not, is an economic proposition. You need money to run a journalism firm or a media firm or anything. And when you realize that journalism is an economic proposition, things start getting clearer to you. You start understanding why the news is behaving the way it is. And what's happening is that both these objectives don't really sit well with each other. Me presenting my facts or presenting things that you should care about doesn't necessarily go in line with things that will get you hooked. And again, this is a observation that you need to think about, and think about whether your attention is going to things that don't really matter to you or don't really affect you in that sense. And let's see. Okay. So just give me a second. I'm just trying to see if I've missed out on something because I've done a lot of writing down and I'm quite.
Sagar, so sorry to cut you, but you're not audible. Sagar, you're not audible. No, you're not audible. All right, we'll have a speaker joining us in another 2 minutes. So kindly hold back. Also, we'll be having a guest.
Cool. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, yes. we
Great,
can.
great. All right. Okay, so I think I was talking about evidence, and I was talking about why why good why good journalism is not necessarily the most exciting journalism to kind of present, because number one, good journalism is rare, because good journalism is also equal to good writing and crafting a story. The reason I could have very well written the facts that I read on my in the constitution or in the dictionary in my notebook, but I need to craft a story and tell you why evidence is important, and why evidence is based on why evidence and good facts are like the foundation of good journalism. So, for crafting that story is an art in itself, which a lot of people haven't kind of mastered yet. Uh, and humans inherently like simple ideas. For example, it's always easier to choose a correct side and a wrong side. It's the reason why India Pakistan matches are so exciting, because here we have a good side and we have a bad side. We have decided for ourselves which is the good side, and it's so simple and satisfying when India wins at the end of the match. And that simple idea, or the fact that humans love simple ideas, is what news medias rely on. So if I give you a sweeping statement, you're much more likely to read that than reading a statement that kind of weighs in both sides, is generous to the other side, and kinds of presents both sides of the story. And objectivity is a myth. When I say objectivity is a myth, I mean, if there is a news house claiming to be unbiased, that's completely not true. Humans inherently have biases. The faster we acknowledge the fact that humans have biases, it will kind of shape our worldview in a better way. The reason I say this is that even in photography, photography is supposed to be the purest sense of journalism. It's basically a photo, it's presenting you things. Even that has bias of what is being presented to you. There's a bias on who's the person that the photographer must have clicked somebody's picture, and because the photographer assumes that person is important, so that's biased as well. So there is bias everywhere. In good journalism, acknowledging that bias, being assertive with that bias, but at the same time being generous to the other side, is what good journalism is all about. It's about presenting both sides of the story regardless of what your stance is. A very good example of this, or an example of where journalism kind of held powerful people accountable, is this most simple example is the 1991 scam, Harshad Mehta scam, which has now been turned into a web series, where a journalist took the effort of tracing every fact and gathering evidence, which is very difficult when the person is so powerful. And doing that takes time, and presenting those facts in a manner where, uh, you know, uh, common man can consume is also difficult. And if you notice in that web series, they like it's very evident that the journalist is asking the other person for their side of the story, regardless of what their stance is. So I think that is that's quite important when you're presenting facts, or you're presenting a story of having both sides. And what's also happened is journalism is based on gospel truths, traditions that have kind of come from a very very long time. Like you can't use I, you can't have stories with a personal touch. But if you want to be a journalism in this age, I would highly recommend challenging those notions. Present the story in the most authentic way to your audience, and you should know your audience well for that. If you know your audience well, that's when you can you know kind of present good journalism. And I just need to see if I've missed out on something. uh, right, okay, about shaping your worldview and why your worldview cannot be shaped through the news. News, as I said again, is a perception building machine. Is things where exceptions are being created, or exceptional things are being presented to you. So your worldview can't be based on exceptional things. It has to be based on what's actually happening in the world. Everything when it comes to if I were to put it in this way, your to shape your worldview, it will take you a lot of effort, and you will have to get over your intellectual laziness. So this term intellectual laziness is something that was coined by John Trolley, and would highly recommend this book as well, Economics for the Common Good, page number 32. So he says that we must all take responsibility for our limited understanding of the economic phenomena. He's talking about economics, but this is applicable for everything. Our desire to believe what we want to believe, our relatively intellectual laziness, and our cognitive biases. We all have the ability to understand economics, or good journalism for this matter. But as I've already shown, errors in reasoning cannot necessarily be explained away by IQ or educational level. Now I'm going to skip to the last part of what he says. Let's admit it, it's easier to watch a film or devour a good thriller than to launch a book on economics, or to read an article that's filled with evidence and with a great story of both sides. Uh, and when we muster the resolve to do so, we expect the news article to be easy to understand, exemplified in an extreme form by the simplest of theses of what Paul Krugman calls airport economics. It's airport economics is basically a term where you pick up a book on economics at the airport, and you read it on your journey, and you expect to understand complex terms and of how the economic machinery works. And it doesn't really work that way. And in every area of academic study, going beyond appearances require more effort, less certainty, and more determination in the quest of understanding. But that is the price we have to pay if we are to get the policies we deserve. I think that kind of sums up of what your role has to be in this as a news consumer. It is to consume. It's to move over your to get over your intellectual laziness, to find the quest for truths, to understand or challenge your own notions. You might be on either side, and Vivek Yadav has said, has news become more source of an entertainment than facts? Absolutely, because humans love entertainment. I'm not really blaming any news media for functioning the way they are, because humans love entertainment. You're on Instagram for entertainment. You just happen to come on this. You were here to give your attention to the stories, to the reels, to see what other people have for you. So entertainment is something that we inherently enjoy, and that's why the news is giving to you what the news is essentially giving to you what humans are consuming. So absolutely, Vivek Yadav, it is become source of entertainment, but that doesn't mean good journalism doesn't exist. Now to come back and kind of also present the other side where I talk about the positives. Good journalism does exist, but you have to understand the incentives that good journalism has. Good journalism inherently can't be dictated by the ads, or by, if you look at India, there is a certain company that owns a lot of the media, and that means the perception of that company is always going to be great, or is not going to be challenged in the public eye, because they control the news. So you need to kind of understand who is controlling your news, or who is controlling what is being presented to you. If if you want good journalism, it will take effort. Now, this effort can be in terms of time, or it can be in terms of money. When I say money, there are news media outlets there where you can actually pay money and consume the news. I consume my news. So I have always been the fan of The Economist, or of foreign policy. But all of these require me to pay money, and to kind of get those magazines at home, or as in a digital medium. But you need to talk. So if there's a takeaway from this talk, is if you want good journalism, try and understand the incentives behind the journalism, and if the objective, the purest objective of journalism is being met by them, or are they in the liberty to exercise their powers to give you the facts, and the news that you deserve. I think it's 8:30, and that's where my talk ends. But I am extremely open to questions. I've been looking at the audience. There are consistently 15, 16 people. I am very grateful that there are, you guys are interested in knowing more about the news. And this is, again, disclaimer, all of this is, I'm not a journalist myself. I am an entrepreneur by profession. I just happen to like consuming the news and creating a story about my perception of the news. But if you guys resonated with it, that really means a lot to me. That means I'm right, or but again, as I said, being right isn't always necessary. It's being truthful is what is necessary. So I'm ready to take questions. I've seen a few questions pop up. Bianca, if you can help me with those questions,
Yes.
we'll get started with that.
So the first question is by Ayush Ramesh. He asks, should the people always view news with some skepticism? What should be the approach of people while consuming the news?
Okay. Whose question was this?
Ayush.
Ayush, thank you for that question, Ayush. Great question. I think it's all about, again, as I said, is about challenging yourself, or challenging the side that you are on. If the news is, you inherently are biased towards one side, or you lean towards one side. Now, when you're consuming that news, are you giving into the bias, or are you accepting that, okay, this article is extremely right or extremely wrong, or are you challenging yourself to find the evidence? If, again, you should find evidence for things that really matter to you. If you go on and try to find evidence for every news article that exists, you will be short of time, and honestly short of mental energy to do so. But if you really feel that this news really, really affects me, please take the time to kind of challenge your notions, understand the concept in depth, try to find statistics on it, and yeah, that's how you should kind of consume your news. Like, don't take everything for face value, especially if you are kind of, into the topic, or the topic really, or the issue really affects you. I hope that answers your question, Ayush.
Alright. The next question is by Shreya. She wants to know, what are your views on the center's guidelines on OTT platforms?
Right. Okay. My okay. How do I put this politically correctly? Do I have to be politically correct here? I don't know. Again, but I would like to go back to this book that talks about freedom of expression. Article 19 guarantees the freedom of expression, and if the state and here there is one very interesting line that I really like. Where it says that to single out the press for laying upon its excessive or prohibitive burdens, which would restrict the circulation, impose a penalty on its right to choose the instruments for its exercise, or to seek an alternative media. Uh, Now, I'm not a lawyer. I won't pretend to be an expert in this topic, but my take on that is that the government really needs to kind of go back to the drawing board and think about whether placing these restrictions really, affect the kind of discourse that's happening. Our prime minister has been very vocal about, having both sides of the story being said, and but it feels kind of hypocritical there. But that's really on the government to decide whether. I personally disagree with it. I completely disagree with it. I don't think OTT should be regulated. Self-regulation could be something that they could practice, but the government, again, what the government is doing here is extremely interesting. It's kind of tapping into the emotion. There is an emotion here that the people are angry about issues that don't really affect them. So there is this whole branch of people, it could be the majority currently, where they care about issues that don't really directly affect them, but the government is catering to that majority. So I think if you're talking about the government, you also have to talk about the people. If the people really get offended by it, then the government is going to take. So if the people care about it, then the government is going to take action there. Then the conversation really comes back to us. Why do we care about this? Why do we, spend our time and our mental energy on a topic that seems trivial for most of us? So yeah, I think that is kind of my take on the OTT regulations. And I do think the government should go back to the drawing board and think about what they've done with this, or the pattern that they've kind of displayed in kind of regulating content or media for that matter.
The next question is by Shyama Yadav. She wants to know, in the current scenario, is the audience interested in knowing both the sides?
Okay, I'm not going to. There is a section of the audience that wants to know both the sides. That section is in the minority, and but mostly no. I think mostly it's again coming back to this, where there are two sides in a news conversation, and if you are on this side, then you will really, really hope that this side wins, and if you're on this side, then you'll really, really hope this side wins, because that's what news has been boiled down to, being right. But if you are, if who asked the question?
Shyama.
Shama, if you are interested in knowing both the sides, that's great news. Then you should go out and seek both the sides of the story, understand both the sides of the story. But sadly, we are not in the majority there. So, but yeah, there is a section, and there is a section of journalistic media houses catering to those needs as well. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
The next question is by Kaushar. He wants to know, what will it take to change and challenge the existing notions of journalism, and how do we revive it back?
Can you repeat the question again?
What will it take to change and challenge the existing notions of journalism, and how do we revive it back?
When you say notion, is it the public notion of, or is it like journalism in general? So okay, so when it comes to, if Kaushar is talking about reviving the old kind of journalism, I think it really boils down to how how we not regulate digital media, or how we look at digital media, because sadly everything is moving towards digital, and the digital economy by design is based on attention. So crafting better stories, or crafting or making good journalism as exciting as poor journalism that isn't based on evidence and facts, could kind of shift the notion towards a better journalism, where explainer journalism is what it's called, where you can explain the evidence, both sides. If that's presented to the consumer in a better way, then that's the only way. If you make it difficult for the consumer, that the consumer is not going to consume that, then they'll much rather consume the news that is sensationalized but is easy to consume. So make good journalism better to consume, and you'll be able to revive good journalism again.
Our next question is by Princey D'Souza. She wants to know, where do we find real news now, since even this sector is partially brought by the honorable government?
again, can you repeat the question?
Where do we find real news now, since this sector is partially bought by our honorable government?
Right. Okay. Very great questions, and these people aren't holding any guns back. But thank you for that question, Princey. I think the onus is really onto you. Now, if I present the news channels that I look at for my news, that would really bring in my bias. So, sadly, for good news right now, you need to, or the news that you really care about, you need to kind of delve deeper, read more, and try and understand both sides. Now, when you say it's partially bought by our honorable government, while that in some sense is something people would agree, because the government is good friends with the certain group, and but it really boils down to evidence again. When you find, if you have to find real news, try and understand if that news is backed by evidence. If it is backed by evidence, then you can kind of be comforted in the fact that the opinion that I hold is backed by evidence. The minute your opinion is not held by evidence, then it's not news anymore. Evidence is still available. You can still find evidence. It's just not as exciting as the news that's being presented to us.
Okay. And our last question is again by Shreya. The question is, in times like this, has the onus shifted to the consumer of the news to sieve through opinions versus facts?
Absolutely. And I think it's not a new phenomena. It's always existed. But we, as a young generation, have seen this right now. I am not qualified or experienced enough to know how it happened back. But I'm sure there was a certain way people had to find what is good news. Like, you wouldn't find news to be accurate everywhere. You will still rely on reputed media establishments to do that. But in this generation, for the generation that I can answer this question for, absolutely, the onus is on the consumer to sieve through opinions versus facts, and opinions that are backed by evidence. I mean, opinions aren't bad. Like, you can have opinions as long as those opinions are backed by facts. And then you can decide whether that opinion really is something that I want to hold, or do I want to challenge myself and see the other side and see if they have any evidence. And the simple answer to this is opinions can be complex. Again, as I said, humans like simple ideas, but opinions can be complex where you have information from both sides and you're presenting that. The fact that you want a simple answer from me, or a blanket statement from me that, hey, is the government bad or is the government good, is again you trying to satisfy your your perception or your bias about the government. And I'm not here to do that. I'm here for you to tell you that you need to challenge yourself and ask yourself whether what is happening is right or not. And don't look for statements or from Q&A or from Instagram posts, but actually try and do the hard work and try and find the facts for what's important to you.
So I believe that was the end of the question and answer session. Firstly, thank you very much, Sagar, for agreeing to come and speak to us on this burning issue nowadays. We believe all of us have taken a lot from this session today, and we might benefit from it as well. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you guys. See you. Bye-bye.
OPCGT National Youth Parliament 2021 will be conducted on the 10th and 11th of April by means of an online conference. We would be very glad to host all of you there. Do register for the National Youth Parliament via the link in our bio. Thank you everyone for joining us.